imagine for a second that you were trying to learn a completely new language. Let's say, Russian or Mandarin.
Oh, wow. Okay. Setting the bar high right out of the gate.
Right. So your instructor asks you what you do on a typical Tuesday, and, well, because your vocabulary is, pretty limited, you just respond like a robot. You say, I wake up, I eat, I work.
Yeah, which is factually accurate, sure, but it is just incredibly boring.
Exactly. You're just transmitting this raw data without any real human flavor to it.
It's purely transactional at that stage. I mean, you are just trying to survive the interaction without making some glaring grammatical error.
Just sweating through it. But what if I told you that in the process of fixing those robotic beginner-level sentences, the linguists have accidentally stumbled onto one of the most effective research-backed ways to cure your procrastination.
Now, that is quite the hook.
Right. So welcome to today's deep dive. Today we are pulling from a really fascinating source document, and on the surface it looks like just a comprehensive guide designed for English learners to practice daily routine conversation.
Which sounds pretty basic, honestly.
It does. But our mission for this deep dive is to look way past the vocabulary lists. We are going to explore how this document is actually it's a brilliant blueprint for hacking your habits, managing your daily energy, and building much deeper connections with the people around you. So whether you are actively learning English right now or you're a native speaker, this is going to be incredibly relevant to you.
Yeah, the underlying premise here is that the very structure of learning a new language actually mirrors the structure of building a better life. It's fascinating.
It really is. So we're going to give you a roadmap of what we're covering today. First, we'll look at why the mundane daily routine is a linguistic goldmine. Then, how specific grammar structures literally force productivity.
Right. And then the science of structuring a day.
Yep. And finally, the mechanics of turning a basic answer into a real, genuine human connection. So let's jump in. To understand how a language guide can hack your productivity, we first have to understand why this guide focuses entirely on daily routines. I mean, why use the mundane Tuesday as the Trojan horse for learning?
It's a great question. Why not start with something exciting?
Yeah, like travel. Or
Sure.
ordering food at a fancy restaurant. Right?
Well, it comes down to a concept in psychology and cognitive science called cognitive load.
Okay, break that down for us.
Sure. So think of your brain like a computer. You only have so much random access memory, or RAM, available at any given moment.
Right.
When you are learning a language or really learning any complex new skill, figuring out how to conjugate a verb or, just remember a vocabulary word, that takes up a massive amount of that RAM.
Which means if your system is maxed out just trying to build a single sentence, you have absolutely zero processing power left to actually express your personality.
Precisely. You just don't have the bandwidth. And this is why daily routines are the ultimate training ground. I mean, everyone has a daily routine, even if it's just the sequence of waking up, eating, and sleeping.
Everyone does it.
Exactly. And because these actions happen every single day, you can practice the exact same words and sentence patterns over and over again. You aren't wasting cognitive load trying to invent a scenario about a delayed flight at an airport that might happen, once a year?
Right, yeah.
You are narrating your actual predictable life. And this repetition drastically lowers the cognitive load.
It makes complete sense. It's kind of like learning to cook by perfecting your favorite breakfast every morning.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah. You don't need a massive, complicated recipe book right away.
Yeah.
You just need a few reliable ingredients, or in this case, sentence patterns that you can use again and again to lower the pressure and build fluency.
Exactly. Lowering the stakes is key.
And once that pressure is off, the guide introduces a really subtle shift. It moves the learner away from those choppy robotic sentences we talk about, the I wake up, I eat, by introducing simple connectors.
Right. Words like then and after that.
Yeah. But here's the problem most learners face. They want to be totally accurate, so they speak in absolutes. And the guide actually pairs these connectors with another linguistic tool that has a profound psychological effect.
Frequency words.
Yes,
Heh.
frequency words. It emphasizes teaching learners to use the simple present tense alongside words like usually, often, or rarely.
Rather than speaking in absolutes, right? Because a beginner often relies heavily on the word always. I always wake up at 7.
Right, which sounds super unnatural.
And it's a rigid trap. If you wake up at 8 one day, well, the statement becomes a lie.
Yeah.
By teaching the word usually, I usually wake up at 7, the language naturally introduces flexibility. It introduces self-compassion. It lowers the stakes completely.
I love that. Think about your own habits right now as you're listening. When we set goals in our native language, we tend to use absolute terms, right? I am going to work out every single day.
And then what happens?
The moment we miss a Tuesday, we feel like a total failure and we just abandon the whole system.
Yep, it's all or nothing.
But what this language guide is doing is subtly teaching the learner that consistency isn't about perfection. Saying, I usually work out, leaves room for life to actually happen.
It does. And this low-stakes, repeatable framework sets the perfect stage for the first massive behavioral shift that's hidden in this lesson.
Okay, let's get into this.
Because the learner is already practicing these reliable sentence patterns, the source text introduces a specific grammatical structure that doubles as an elite psychological tool for overcoming procrastination.
Yes, the if-then plan. Let's dig into this because this is where the linguistic structure literally becomes a behavioral life hack.
Right. So the guide essentially teaches learners to form sentences using a conditional structure, which directly mirrors the work of psychologist Peter Gollwitzer.
Okay.
In the late 90s, Gollwitzer conducted this landmark research on what he coined implementation intentions. He wanted to know the difference between people who merely intend to do something and people who actually follow through.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt and push back on this for a second.
Go for it.
Because I want to make sure we aren't just confusing, like, good intentions with a magic grammar trick.
Fair enough.
Is the grammatical structure of an if-then sentence actually changing human behavior? Or is it just the fact that the person is taking the time to write a goal down? I mean, if I write, I will study later on a sticky note and put it on my monitor, isn't that accomplishing the exact same thing?
That is the logical assumption, for sure.
Yeah.
But the neuroscience tells a completely different story.
Really?
Yeah. Writing "I will study later" on a sticky note relies heavily on your brain's executive function. Later is a really vague concept. So when later arrives, your prefrontal cortex still has to negotiate. It has to ask, am I too tired right now? Is there something better on TV? Should I do it now or maybe in 20 minutes? You are spending valuable cognitive energy deciding whether to execute the task.
Oh, wow. So you are basically leaving yourself an intellectual escape hatch.
Exactly. You are inviting decision fatigue. Gollwitzer's research showed that a vague intention, even if it's written down, has a relatively low success rate.
Ah.
But an implementation intention, an if-then plan, changes the cognitive process. It connects a specific environmental cue with a specific action. If I finish eating dinner, then I will study English for 20 minutes.
So you are preloading the decision.
You are bypassing the prefrontal cortex's debate entirely. The environmental trigger finishing dinner acts as an automated cue. When the plate is empty, the debate is over. The action simply executes.
That is wild.
In Gollwitzer's foundational studies, participants who used the specific if X then Y structure were significantly more likely to complete difficult tasks, like writing complex reports over a holiday break compared to those who just set a strong intention.
Right.
By teaching English learners this specific conditional grammar, the guide is simultaneously hardwiring their brains for elite self-management.
That is so powerful.
Yeah.
But okay, if we've successfully conserved all of this decision-making energy using if-then statements, we inevitably face a new problem, right?
Which is?
How do we protect and replenish that energy when it naturally depletes as the day goes on? Because you can't just run at 100% all day.
No, absolutely not.
And the source document anticipates this. It takes the concept of structure and scales it up from a single sentence to the architecture of an entire day.
It does. It moves from grammar into the science of human well-being, starting with the morning routine. And what is so brilliant here is that the guide doesn't suggest building some, hyper-optimized 2-hour morning sequence that you might see some influencer promoting.
Yeah, like wake up at 4 a.m. and take an ice bath.
Right, exactly. It focuses entirely on defense.
Yes. The phrases they teach the learners to use are incredibly telling. They teach sentences like, I write down my top 3 tasks, and, crucially, I avoid checking my phone immediately.
That phone one is huge.
Let's look at the mechanism behind that.
Yeah.
Why is checking a phone first thing in the morning so universally destructive to our productivity? I mean, everyone does it, but we all know it feels bad.
It has to do with your body's natural chemistry. When you wake up, your body experiences what is known as the cortisol awakening response.
Okay.
Your cortisol levels naturally rise to help pull you out of sleep and get you moving. It is a healthy, necessary function.
Right, you need that to wake up.
But when you immediately open an inbox full of urgent requests or you start scrolling through negative news, you artificially spike that cortisol into a full-blown stress response.
Oh, man. So you are flooding your system with fight-or-flight chemistry before you've even had a glass of water.
Yes, you are forcing your brain into a reactive high-alert state before it has fully booted up. You are letting the external world dictate your priorities for the day.
That makes so much sense.
By giving the learner the vocabulary to say, I plan my day before checking my phone, the guide is actually installing a psychological firewall against morning anxiety.
I love that term, a psychological firewall. Think about your own morning routine for a second, right?
Yeah.
If you are waking up and immediately checking notifications, you are essentially starting your day in a defensive posture, fighting off external demands.
Definitely.
A well-designed routine should feel more like designing a level in a video game.
Oh, okay. Let's hear this.
You wouldn't make the entire level an exhausting, non-stop boss fight, right? The player would just get frustrated, throw the controller across the room, and quit.
Totally.
You have to build in mechanics that help the player survive. You need safe zones.
That video game analogy perfectly describes the next phase the guide covers, which is the science of the microbreak.
Yes, the power-ups.
Exactly. The source explicitly targets the myth of nonstop productivity. It integrates research showing that continuous mental effort leads to diminishing returns, and it provides specific vocabulary to counteract it.
Listen carefully to the phrase they emphasize here. It's not just, I stop working. The phrase is, I step away from my desk.
That physical relocation seems to be the key, doesn't it?
Yeah, why is that distinction so important?
The physical relocation is vital. When we maintain intense focus, our cognitive load accumulates. Stepping away, specifically engaging in micro movements like a 5-minute stretch or just taking a short walk, literally changes our physiology.
Wow.
Systematic reviews on physical activity demonstrate that these micro movements flush accumulated stress hormones from the bloodstream and reset our attentional capacity.
That's amazing.
So the guide teaches learners to say, a short walk helps me clear my mind. It directly links the linguistic action to the physiological benefit of resetting that cognitive RAM.
Okay, so we have our video games start getting our bearings and setting a firewall before the enemy's attack.
Yeah.
And we have our power-ups during the day, which are these micro breaks that flush stress hormones.
Right.
What happens at the end of the game?
Well, the guide introduces the concept of the wind-down routine. It notes that a stressful day will compound and worsen if there is no clear boundary between work and rest.
Which is an incredibly common trap now that so many of us work remotely.
Oh, absolutely.
The laptop just stays open on the kitchen counter, work bleeds right into dinner, and then dinner bleeds right into lying in bed answering emails.
And without a transition, your brain remains in that low-level fight-or-flight state. The guide teaches learners to articulate specific actions to signal to the body that the workday is over.
Like what?
Writing out tomorrow's tasks to empty the mind. Physically closing the laptop. Turning off screens. Furthermore, it connects this wind-down phase to the concept of sleep regularity.
So going to bed and waking up at the exact same time.
Yes, aligning your circadian rhythm. The research highlighted in the source shows that sleep regularity is actually one of the strongest predictors of positive mental health outcomes.
Wait, really?
Yeah, even more so than sleep duration in some studies.
That is fascinating. It's the save point in our video game analogy.
Oh, I love that.
If you just unplug the console while the game is in the middle of a chaotic level, you lose all your progress. You wake up the next day starting from a deficit, You need that intentional sequence, that wind down routine to properly save your progress, secure your energy, and allow your system to power down.
That's exactly right. By equipping learners with phrases like, I try to go to bed at the same time every night to reduce anxiety, the guide enforces a profound philosophy. Protecting your energy requires just as much deliberate structure as expending it.
Absolutely. But, personal optimization in a vacuum eventually just turns you into a highly efficient, well-rested robot.
Nobody wants to be.
Right. The ultimate goal of this source material isn't isolation. The true purpose of mastering these personal systems and this language is to build social connection.
Because language is, at its core, a tool for social cohesion.
Exactly.
And the guide addresses a very specific, predictable mistake that language learners make, which absolutely destroys social connection. It's called the one-word trap.
Oh, we've all experienced this. You ask a colleague, hey, what do you usually do in the mornings? And they just look at you and grunt, coffee.
Right. It is technically an answer, but socially it is a dead end.
Totally.
When someone gives a one-word answer, they are signaling a closed posture. More importantly, they are putting the entire cognitive burden of keeping that interaction alive squarely on your shoulders.
Oh, that's so true.
You now have to scramble to find a follow-up question to keep the dialogue from dying.
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
So how does the guide instruct learners to break out of that trap? What is the architecture of a successful social exchange?
It deconstructs conversation into a very simple three-step loop. Answer, add detail, ask back.
Okay, let's hear an example.
So if you ask, what time do you usually wake up? The learner is taught to first answer the question, I usually wake up at 7. Second, add a detail to provide a hook. Then I make a pot of coffee. And third, pass the conversational baton back. What about you?
What about you? Passing the baton back triggers conversational reciprocity.
Yes, and human psychology is deeply wired for reciprocity. Our brain's reward centers actually light up when we engage in balanced, reciprocal social loops.
That makes a lot of sense.
But the guide pushes the learner even further to elevate the conversation from just a basic exchange of facts to a really meaningful interaction. It introduces a specific formula for adding a reason or a feeling to their daily habits.
So moving from the purely functional, I go for a walk, to I go for a walk because it helps me relax.
Exactly.
Or I study at night because it is quiet and I feel focused.
By adding the because and attaching an emotion to it, the learner is doing much more than just practicing complex sentence structures. They are sharing their internal state. They are also encouraged to share cultural nuances, using phrases like sleep in or take it easy on the weekends. Sharing these lifestyle differences transforms the interaction from an exchange of data into an exchange of values.
This right here is the absolute core insight of this entire document. This formula, I usually do X because it makes me feel Y, isn't just a clever trick to sound like a native speaker. It is literally the foundational formula for human vulnerability.
When you break it down like that, it reveals how much we hide behind complex language.
Think about it. By forcing a beginner to add the why and the feeling to a completely mundane action, you are inviting another human being to actually know you.
Yeah.
When you say, I take a walk because it clears my mind, you aren't just reciting vocabulary. You're telling the other person, my mind gets cluttered. I experience stress and overwhelm just like you do. And here's the simple tool I use to cope with it. You are instantly building a bridge of empathy.
We often lose that level of intentional, transparent communication in our native language.
We really do.
We are so capable of using jargon, sarcasm, or abstract concepts that we forget how to just state the simple truth of what we are doing and how it actually impacts us.
Which perfectly frames the journey we've taken today. We started by looking at the most basic building blocks of a new language. I wake up, I eat. And we uncovered a masterclass in behavioral design and human connection.
We examine how reducing cognitive load through repeatable routines frees up our mental RAM. We saw how the specific grammar of an if-then plan bypasses decision fatigue and physically alters our follow-through.
Yes. And we looked at the physiology of a well-architected day, protecting ourselves from the morning cortisol spike, flushing stress hormones with micro breaks, and building save points into our evenings to align our circadian rhythms.
And ultimately, we deconstructed the social psychology of conversation, exploring how adding a simple reason and feeling to our actions breaks the one word trap and invites genuine vulnerability.
So, as you go about the rest of your day, navigating your own routines, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. If learning a new language explicitly forces a person to state the purpose and the feeling behind their habits, literally requiring them to say out loud, I do this because it helps me feel calm, what would happen if we started applying that same beginner-level clarity to our native language?
It would require stripping away a lot of our conversational armor.
Could intentionally stripping away our complicated vocabulary and our tendency to hide behind professional jargon actually help us realize which parts of our daily routine are truly serving us
Mm.
and which parts are just accumulated noise? Maybe the secret to a less stressed, more productive life isn't about learning more words or buying a more complex planner. Maybe it's just about being incredibly ruthlessly clear about the few simple actions that actually matter.